The old woman on the train pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand just before she got off at her stop. She looked straight into my eyes and said, "Do not open the envelope on the dining table until you have read what is written here." I almost laughed. I almost tossed the paper away. But something in the way she held my gaze made me tuck it into my coat pocket instead. And what I found the next morning turned my entire world upside down. Hello, friends. Welcome back to our channel. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe so you never miss a story. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Lagos, London, Toronto, Melbourne, Accra? We truly love to know how far these stories travel. Now let us begin. I am 54 years old, and I have spent most of those years being grateful for what I have. That is what my mother always said, be grateful, Ngozi. Count your blessings like beads on a rosary. So I did. I counted them faithfully every single morning. A home, a husband, a life that looked perfectly arranged from the outside. My name is Ngozi Ease Martins, and on the evening of a cold Tuesday in November, I was sitting in the second-to-last car of the 6:15 commuter train from Enugu to Awka, exhausted in the way that only women of a certain age understand, the exhaustion that lives in your bones, not just your body. I had spent the day at the government ministry office, where I work as a senior records clerk. 31 years behind that desk. 31 years of filing, stamping, organizing, correcting other people's mistakes, and being passed over for promotion in favor of younger colleagues. Always younger, always with connections I did not have. But I was reliable. They knew Ngozi would always be there. And so I kept showing up. That Tuesday, I had stayed 2 hours late to finish a report my supervisor had forgotten until the last minute. By the time I got to the station, the platform was nearly empty. The harmattan wind was cutting through everything, my coat, my head wrap, straight into my tiredness. I just wanted to sit down, close my eyes, and let the rhythm of the train carry me home. I found a seat by the window in a nearly empty car. Across the aisle, 2 young men were laughing loudly at something on a phone screen. 3 rows ahead, a mother was nursing a baby wrapped in yellow cloth. And beside me, taking up the window seat, was an old woman. She was very small, thin-boned, the way very old women sometimes are, as if life has slowly been returning them to something essential. She wore a blue ankara blouse and a simple wrapper, and around her shoulders she had draped a heavy woven shawl that looked handmade. Her hair was white, completely, purely white, gathered and wrapped beneath a plain cotton head tie. On her lap sat a battered leather bag, the kind that belongs to no particular era, the kind that has simply always existed. She was looking out the window when I sat down, and she did not look at me for a long time. I pulled out my own phone, opened my reading app, and tried to settle into the novel I had been working through for 3 weeks. I could never find enough time to read anymore. My husband, Chukwemeka, had once called my reading a hobby that belonged to another life. He said it with a smile, but he was not entirely joking. We had been married for 26 years. The train lurched and began to move. Outside, the city thinned and gave way to dusty roadside stalls, then low brush, then open sky going orange at the edges. The old woman beside me turned from the window. She looked at me directly, the way very old people sometimes do, without the social hesitation that younger people maintain, without pretending she was looking at something else. "You are tired," she said. Not a question. I glanced at her, a little surprised. "Yes, Ma. It was a long day." She nodded slowly, as if confirming something she had already suspected. "What kind of work do you do?" "I am a records clerk. Government ministry." I offered a small, polite smile, the kind that is also a gentle door closing. I was not in the mood for conversation. I just wanted the train to carry me home. But the old woman did not seem to notice. Or perhaps she noticed and simply did not mind. "Records," she said, nodding again. "So you keep other people's documents. Other people's proof." She paused. "Do you keep your own?" I blinked. "I'm sorry. Your own documents. Your own proof." She turned those dark, clear eyes on me. They were remarkable eyes, not young, but absolutely alert. Women of your age, in your situation, we often forget to keep our own records. We are so busy keeping everyone else's. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. There was something in her tone that was not unfriendly, but it was very direct. The kind of directness that belongs to people who have decided they no longer have time to dance around the truth. The train swayed. We passed a cluster of roadside lights. "Where are you traveling to, Ma?" I asked, mostly to redirect the conversation. "In Poor Junction," she said. "My granddaughter lives there. I visit on Tuesdays." She said it simply, with the particular contentment of someone whose life has been reduced to its most important parts, and is not sad about that at all. We rode in silence for a few minutes. I tried to return to my book, but something had shifted. The old woman's words were sitting oddly with me, like a stone placed in a familiar room. Nothing dangerous, but impossible not to notice. She spoke again without preamble. "When you get home tonight," she said, "you will probably find dinner to cook, or a note that says your husband has eaten already. You will probably clean up, check on something in the house, and go to bed. And tomorrow you will do the same." I stared at her. "How did you?" She waved her hand gently. "I am not a prophetess. I am just old. I have seen many women live the same Tuesday many times over." She looked back out the window for a moment. "On your dining table, there is probably an envelope, or a folder, or some papers that do not belong to you and that no one has mentioned to you." A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the harmattan. There was, in fact, an envelope on our dining table. I had noticed it that morning as I rushed past to grab my bag. A brown A4 envelope, sealed, with no writing on the outside. I had assumed it was something Emeka had brought home from his office. He was a civil engineer, and sometimes he brought contract documents home to review. I had not given it a second thought. I looked at the old woman. My voice came out smaller than I intended. "What do you know about any envelope?" She looked back at me with those clear eyes. "I do not know anything specifically, my daughter. I only know patterns. And the pattern I see in your face is one I have seen before, in my own face once many years ago." She reached into her bag and took out a small folded piece of paper. She held it out to me. "Read this before you open anything on that table. Promise me." I took the paper. It was folded in thirds, soft from having been carried for a while. My name was not on it. There was nothing on the outside at all. "Why?" I asked. "Because what you know before you open a door determines what you do when you walk through it," she said. "If you know nothing, you react. If you know something, you can choose." The train was slowing. We were coming into a smaller station. In Poor Junction, I realized, looking out the window. The old woman gathered her shawl and her battered bag with the practiced movements of someone accustomed to leaving. She stood, gave me one final look, steady, kind, and somehow very serious, and said, "The Lord does not send warnings to people he has given up on. Remember that." And then she moved down the aisle and was gone, and the train doors opened and closed, and we moved on into the darkening evening, and I sat holding a folded piece of paper from a woman I did not know, whose name I had not even thought to ask. I almost did not read it on the train. I turned it over in my hands twice, then put it in my coat pocket. I told myself I would look at it later, at home, in proper light. But somewhere between that station and mine, I took it out again. Inside, in a careful, slightly old-fashioned handwriting, were 7 lines. "Before you open any document that is not addressed to you, photograph it exactly as it is. Note the date you first saw it. Do not disturb it. Call someone you trust, not your husband. Check your own name in the property registry. A woman should always know what is registered in her name and what is not." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it back up and put it in my pocket and looked out at the dark fields passing in the window, and I felt, for the first time in a very long time, that something enormous was moving quietly behind the ordinary surface of my life. The house was warm when I got home. That was the first thing, the warmth. Emeka had turned on the generator, which he usually did not bother with on weekdays unless he was entertaining someone. The living room light was on, and from upstairs I could hear the murmur of the television. I stood in the doorway for a moment, coat still on, bag still on my shoulder, listening. The dining table was where it always was, against the far wall, beneath the framed family photograph from our 20th anniversary trip to Abuja. 8 chairs around it. Far too many for 2 people, but Emeka had insisted on the full set when we bought the furniture, years ago, when we still imagined the table would be full of children and relatives on weekends. The envelope was there. Brown. A 4. Sealed. Sitting to the left of the fruit bowl, slightly apart from everything else, as though someone had set it down carefully and deliberately. I did not touch it. I heard Emeka's footsteps above me, moving from what sounded like the study to the bedroom. I took out my phone and, standing exactly where I was, I took 3 photographs of the envelope on the table. From above, from the side, close enough to show it was sealed and that there was no writing on it. Then I put my phone back in my bag, took off my coat, went into the kitchen, and began making soup. Emeka came downstairs about 30 minutes later. He was in his house clothes, the gray shorts and old university sweatshirt he wore when he was relaxed, when he was the version of himself I had fallen in love with. He had kept most of his hair, though it was salted through with gray now. He was still a handsome man. I had never stopped noticing that. "You're late," he said, not unkindly. He poured himself a glass of water from the filter on the counter. "I had to finish Okanma's report." He forgot again. He leaned against the counter, watching me stir the soup. "There is rice from this afternoon. You don't have to cook." "I want to." It was true. Cooking settled me. It had always settled me. The chopping and stirring, the predictable transformation of raw things into something warm and whole. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, or what I had always called companionable. Now I was not so sure what to call it. "There is an envelope on the dining table," I said, without looking up from the pot. A beat. Very brief. But I felt it the way you feel a crack in the floor before you can see it. "Oh yes," he said. "Casual. Easy. Contract papers from the office. I haven't gone through them yet." "Okay," I said. "I'll deal with it this weekend." "Okay," I said again. He refilled his water glass and went back upstairs. I stood over the soup and I breathed very carefully, and I thought about the old woman's 7 lines, and I thought, contract papers do not come in plain, unaddressed, unmarked envelopes. In 26 years of marriage to a civil engineer, I had seen hundreds of contract papers. They always had a company letterhead on the envelope, or a name, or a reference number. They always had something. That envelope had nothing. I ate dinner alone that night. Emeka said he wasn't hungry. He'd eaten a big lunch, he said. I cleared the table, washed the dishes, wiped the counters, and went upstairs. He was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay beside him in the dark and listened to his breathing and wondered how long a person could sleep beside a stranger without knowing it. A long time, apparently, because I had been doing it for at least 2 years. I did not sleep that night. Not deeply, anyway. I lay with my eyes closed and my breathing even, the way you learn to do after years of sleeping beside someone who needs to believe you are at rest, someone who would be unsettled or suspicious, or perhaps simply annoyed if they knew you were lying there thinking. I had become very good at that kind of stillness over the years. The stillness of a woman who has learned to process her thoughts in silence, in the dark, while the world believes she is simply a sleeping wife. Emeka's breathing was slow and steady beside me. He had always been a good sleeper. Nothing seemed to disturb him. I used to admire that. Now I wondered what kind of conscience produces that kind of sleep. At 4:45 in the morning, before the generator came on, before the neighborhood roosters started, before the house had any business being awake, I got up. I moved quietly, bare feet on tile, slow and deliberate. I took my dressing gown from the back of the chair. I did not turn on the bedroom light. I went downstairs. The envelope was still on the dining table, exactly where it had been the night before. I had half expected it to be gone, for Emeka to have moved it, or taken it upstairs, or somehow sensed that I had photographed it. But it was still there, sitting to the left of the fruit bowl, patient and undisturbed. I sat down at the table. I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. Not dramatically heavy, but substantial. There were several pages inside. The seal was strong, the flap glued down tightly, not the kind of casual closure you make when you expect to reopen something later that same evening. This had been sealed by someone who meant for it to stay sealed until the right moment. I turned it over in my hands one more time. Still no writing. No name. No address. No company stamp. Then I opened it. Inside were 4 documents, folded together. The first was a property valuation report, printed on official paper, signed at the bottom by a certified valuer. The address at the top of the report was our home address. Our home, the house on Obi Street, Aka. The house my father had built in 1987 with money saved over 15 years of working at the cement factory. The house he had put in my name when he died in 2009, because he said, a woman needs something that is entirely hers. Something no one can simply walk away with. The house that had been in my name for 15 years. Valued at 48 million naira. I read that number 3 times. The second document was a letter of instruction. It was addressed to a property brokerage firm, Goldleaf Properties and Consultants, with an office address in Onitsha. The letter instructed the firm to proceed with listing the property for sale at the valuation price, with the additional note that the seller was motivated and open to negotiation for quick resolution. It was signed with my husband's name. Not my name. His. The third document was what made my hands go cold. It was a power of attorney, a legal document granting Chukwemeka Martins full authority to act on my behalf in all property transactions relating to the house on Obi's Street, including the authority to sign contracts of sale, receive proceeds, and execute any related agreements. At the bottom was a signature. My name, in handwriting that was close to mine but not quite mine, the letters a little more hurried, the loop of the G slightly wrong, and a notary seal. I sat at that dining table in the gray pre-dawn light for a very long time. I did not cry. I want to be honest about that. I did not cry, not right away, not at that moment. What I felt was something more than sadness and more than anger. It was the specific, hollow feeling of a woman realizing that the life she thought she was living and the life she was actually living had been two entirely different things, running alongside each other in the dark. 26 years. I had given that man 26 years of my life. My cooking, my loyalty, my patience through his difficult seasons, my silence through his many moods. When his business nearly collapsed in 2016, and he spent 6 months barely speaking, I had held the household together and never once thrown it in his face. When his mother was ill and needed care, I had taken a week off work and driven to Nui and looked after her as if she were my own mother, because that is what you do. When I had my fibroid surgery in 2020 and spent 3 months recovering, he had been present in the physical sense of the word. He was in the house, but something in him had already gone somewhere else by then. I had felt it but refused to name it. I named it now, sitting alone in the dark with his forgery in my hands. Greed, and a decision that I did not matter enough to be consulted. The fourth document was the one that told me how far along things already were. It was an email printout, a chain of correspondence between Emeka and a man named Mr. Daiko Koye, who described himself as a serious buyer interested in residential property in Awka. The email chain went back 6 weeks. 6 weeks of negotiation. 6 weeks of my husband discussing, adjusting, positioning, agreeing, all without a single word to me. In the most recent email, sent 4 days ago, Mr. Okoye had confirmed he was ready to proceed. He had funds available. He was proposing to meet the following week to sign a preliminary agreement. The following week was this week. I put the documents back into the envelope exactly as I had found them. I folded the flap down. I placed the envelope back to the left of the fruit bowl, in precisely the same position. Then I went back upstairs, lay down, and lay still until the alarm went off at 6. I called my younger sister, Adana, from the office bathroom at 9:15 that morning. Adana is 47. She is a lawyer. She has never been the soft one of us. That was always me, the older sister, the patient one, the one who smoothed things over. Adana has a habit of looking at a situation and saying exactly what she sees, without decoration, which I had sometimes found exhausting and now found completely necessary. I told her everything. The envelope, the documents, the forged signature, the email chain, the valuation. I told her about the old woman on the train and the note with the 7 instructions, and how I had photographed the envelope before touching it. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Ngozi, Adana said. Her voice was very controlled. You still have those photographs? Yes. And the note the woman gave you? Yes, I kept it. Good. A breath. Don't touch anything else in that envelope. Don't let him know you've seen it. Can you do that? I already put it back exactly the way it was. Another silence, slightly longer. You put it back. She said it not as a question, but as a kind of recognition. Okay, I need you to do something for me this afternoon. Go to the Anambra State Land Registry. You know where it is? Yes. I pass it on my way home sometimes. Go there today. Ask them to run a search on the property on Obi's Street. Ask specifically if there have been any recent filings, any transfer instruments, any consent applications. Anything at all affecting that title in the last 6 months. Take your national ID and your own copy of the original title deed if you have it at home. I have a copy at the office, I said. I keep copies of all important documents here. In the records room. I paused. That is what I do, Adana. I keep records. Then today, she said quietly, you keep your own. I went to the land registry at 2:30 that afternoon, telling my supervisor I had a personal matter to attend to. He barely looked up from his desk. I had never taken unauthorized time off in 31 years. I think he assumed it must be serious. It was. The land registry office in Akka was busy the way government offices always are, crowded with people waiting, forms being passed back and forth, ceiling fans doing their best against the heat, a general atmosphere of important things being processed with inadequate urgency. I joined the queue at the public search desk and waited for 20 minutes. When I got to the counter, I gave the clerk the address and my ID and asked for a search on recent filings. The clerk, a young man with a serious face and ink on his fingers, typed the address into the system, waited, frowned slightly, typed something else. When you say recent, he said, how recent? The last 6 months, I said. Any changes at all? He typed. He waited. He turned the screen slightly toward him and read something, and the slight change in his expression told me something had come up before he said a word. There was a consent application filed, he said carefully. About 3 weeks ago. My chest tightened. What kind of consent application? A governor's consent application for transfer of title. Consent for sale. He looked at me. Are you the registered owner? Yes, I said. I am Ngozi Martins. That property is in my name. I did not file any consent application. I did not authorize anyone to file one on my behalf. He looked at the screen again. The application was filed with a power of attorney document attached. The applicant is listed as Chukwemeka Martins, I said. He looked up at me. My husband, I said. There was a particular quality to the silence that followed. The kind of silence that happens when a government clerk, who has seen many things, recognizes that he is in the middle of something that is about to become much larger than a routine search. Madam, he said carefully, I think you should speak to our supervisor. This is a matter that needs to be handled at a higher level. The supervisor was a woman in her 50s named Mrs. Chikwudi Okafor. She had the look of someone who had worked in land administration long enough to have seen every variety of fraud and deception that families can devise against each other, and who had made peace with that knowledge by becoming absolutely precise and thorough in her work. She listened to everything I said without interrupting. She looked at the photographs on my phone, the envelope, the documents, the email printout I had also photographed before resealing the envelope. She asked me 3 questions. Is this your signature on the power of attorney? She showed me a printout of the document from the registry file. No, I said. Do you have any previous record of signing any document granting your husband authority over this property? No, never. And you are saying this is the first time you have had any knowledge of these proceedings? Yes. She nodded once, the way someone nods when the last piece of a familiar picture falls into place. Madam Ngozi, she said, what has been filed here is a fraudulent power of attorney. The consent process cannot be completed without verification, and your objection, formally filed, will stop that process immediately. She paused. The question is whether you are prepared to file that formal objection today. I thought of the old woman on the train. What you know before you open a door determines what you do when you walk through it. Yes, I said. I am ready. I called Adana from the car park outside the registry. My hands were steadier than I expected. They've already filed for governor's consent, I told her. 3 weeks ago. A brief silence. Then, so he wasn't just planning. He was already moving. Yes. Ngozi. Her voice was very calm, the way it gets when she is thinking quickly. I am coming to Akka this weekend. We're going to sit down together and go through everything. In the meantime, I need you to do one more thing. Can you get into the house before he gets home this evening? Yes, I finish work at 4. Go into his study. Look for any original documents relating to the property. Anything with the title, anything relating to a notary, anything that looks like it could be related to this power of attorney. Do not remove anything. Just photograph it all. Adana. I hesitated. If I do this, there is no going back. There was a pause on the line. Not the pause of someone who doesn't know what to say. The pause of someone who is choosing their words very carefully because they love you. My sister, she said quietly. There has already been no going back. He made that decision when he forged your signature. You are not starting something. You are responding to something that was already started without your knowledge or consent. Another pause. Go home. Document everything. And then make yourself a cup of tea and eat something, because you are going to need your strength. I almost smiled. Trust Adana to end a crisis conversation with instructions to eat. Okay, I said. And Ngozi. Yes. Papa put that house in your name for a reason. He knew what he was doing. Honor that. I sat in the car for a moment after I hung up, watching people come and go through the registry doors. A man in a suit arguing with someone on the phone. A young woman in office clothes carrying a heavy file folder. An elderly couple, moving slowly but moving together, the man's hand on the woman's elbow. I thought about my father. His hands, always dusty from the factory. The way he used to sit on the veranda in the evenings and say, very quietly, almost to himself, "A woman who owns something can always begin again." I started the car and drove home. The study was on the ground floor, beside the dining room. A small room that Emeka had claimed entirely as his own from the very beginning of our time in this house. I had never questioned it. He needed space to work, and I had given it to him, along with everything else. I went in at 4:45, with nearly 2 hours before he was typically home. The room smelled of his aftershave and old paper, and the particular dust that collects in rooms where a man spends a great deal of time alone. His desk was large and dark wood, the kind of desk that is meant to look important. On it sat his laptop, a ceramic cup of pens, and several neat stacks of paper. I did not touch the stacks. I looked. On the left side of the desk, beneath a glass paperweight shaped like a fish, a gift I had given him for our 20th anniversary, was a slim manila folder. On the tab of the folder, in his handwriting, were the words, OB Street, completion. OB Street. OB Street. Our address. I took out my phone and photographed the folder from above, including the handwriting on the tab and the paperweight on top. Then, without moving the paperweight, I carefully lifted the edge of the folder with one finger and looked at the topmost document inside. It was a notary's cover letter. I could not read all of it without removing the folder, and I was not going to remove the folder. But I could see the date, 7 weeks ago, and the notary's name and stamp at the bottom. Barrister Mo Ugachukwu, Notary Public, Onitsha. I photographed what I could see. Then I let the folder settle back exactly as it had been. I replaced everything. I left the room. In the kitchen, I made myself a cup of tea, as Adana had instructed, and I sat at the kitchen table, and I looked out at the small garden beyond the window. The garden I had planted and maintained for 15 years, the hibiscus along the back fence, the pawpaw tree in the far corner, the little vegetable bed where I grew utazi and uziza leaves. And I thought about my father, and I thought about the old woman on the train, and I thought about the fact that in all the years I had kept other people's records in that ministry office, I had never once thought to keep the most important records of all. My own. But I was keeping them now. Emeka came home at 6:40. He had stopped somewhere. I could smell fried fish on him, the kind from the roadside spot near his office that he visited when he was in a certain mood. He greeted me with his usual brief warmth. A pat on my shoulder as he passed through the kitchen, a question about whether there was food, a casual comment about traffic. I answered him calmly. Normally. I dished his food and set it on the dining table and sat with my own plate, and we ate together the way we had eaten together for 26 years. In the manner of two people who have long since said everything they need to say at mealtimes and now exist in a comfortable, apparently peaceful quiet. The envelope sat to the left of the fruit bowl, untouched. He did not look at it during dinner. After dinner, he carried his plate to the kitchen and then went upstairs to his study. I heard him moving around up there. I sat in the living room with a book I was not reading. At 9:30, he came back downstairs. "Ngozi," he said, and something in his tone made me look up. He was standing in the doorway between the living room and the dining area. He was looking at the table. At the envelope. "Yes," I said. A pause. "That envelope on the table. I'm going to need to deal with it this weekend." "Okay," I said. He looked at me for a moment. Not suspiciously, not guiltily, just the ordinary look of a man checking whether his wife is listening. Then he nodded and went back upstairs. I waited until I heard the study door close. Then I put my book down, took out my phone, and sent Adana a message. He is still planning to move forward. Come as soon as you can. Her reply came within 2 minutes. Friday evening. I will be there. Prepare nothing for him. Prepare everything for yourself. Friday came the way difficult days always come, quietly, without warning, dressed in the ordinary clothes of a normal morning. I woke up to the sound of rain. Not heavy rain. The light, tentative kind that arrives in November like an afterthought, tapping at the windows as if asking permission to enter. I lay still and listened to it for a moment before I remembered what day it was. Then everything came back in the way it had been coming back every morning that week, like a cold cloth pressed to my face. Sharp. Clarifying. Impossible to ignore. Emeka had left for work at 7. He had kissed my cheek at the door, the way he sometimes did when he was in a good mood, when things were going well for him. I had stood in the doorway and watched him back his car out of the compound, and I had thought, he thinks everything is still going according to plan. That thought did something strange to me. It did not make me feel powerful. It made me feel deeply, achingly sad. Not for myself, but for the 26 years of a marriage being quietly dismantled by one person while the other stood in the doorway still believing in it. I made breakfast. I watered the uziza in the back garden. I sat with my tea in the rain, and I waited for my sister. Adana arrived at 4:30, pulling up in her small Corolla with a leather briefcase on the passenger seat, and the look of a woman who has spent a 3-hour drive thinking very hard and is now ready to act. She is shorter than me, my sister. I always forget that until I see her in person. Small-framed, quick-moving, with our mother's eyes and our father's jaw. The set of it that means I have made a decision and I am proceeding. She hugged me at the gate. Held on a little longer than usual. You look tired, she said. I haven't been sleeping well. That is understandable. She pulled back and looked at my face carefully, the way she used to look at my homework when we were children. Checking for mistakes, checking for things I might have missed. But you were steady. I can see that. Good. We went inside. I made tea. She opened her briefcase on the dining table. The same table where the envelope had sat all week, which I had finally removed and locked in my wardrobe on Wednesday evening, after Emeka made a brief, almost irritated comment about needing to sort out some paperwork that weekend. I had not told him I had touched it. I had simply moved it. Adana spread her documents on the table. She had been busy all week. I contacted a colleague in Onitsha, she said, without preamble, the way she always works, straight to the center of the thing. He specializes in property fraud. He has reviewed the copies of everything you sent me. She smoothed a page flat with her palm. The power of attorney is fraudulent. The signature does not match your known signature on file with the ministry. We requested a comparison sample this week through proper channels. The notary stamp is from a real notary, but we believe the notary was presented with a falsified identity document and acted in good faith. That means the notary is not criminally liable, but the document is still invalid. So the sale cannot go through? I asked. The sale cannot go through, she confirmed. Your formal objection at the land registry has already frozen the consent application. Nothing can proceed without your written authorization, and you have made clear in writing that you give none. She paused. However, and this is important, Ngozi, freezing the sale is only one part of this. The other part is the criminal aspect. What he has done is document forgery. Fraud. Those are offenses under the criminal code. What you choose to do about that is your decision, but you need to make it deliberately and soon, before he realizes the registry process has been blocked and has time to prepare a response. I wrapped my hands around my teacup. Outside, the rain was still going, steady now, more confident. What are my options? I asked. Adana looked at me levelly. 1. You file a criminal complaint. The police investigate, he is charged, the matter goes to court. It is long, it is public, it is difficult, but it creates an official record and carries real consequences. She held up a second finger. 2. You confront him directly, with me present as a witness, and give him the opportunity to make a formal, documented withdrawal of all proceedings and a signed agreement of non-interference with the property, in exchange for you not pursuing criminal charges. A third finger. 3. You do both, file the complaint and confront him, so that the confrontation happens within the context of an already active investigation, which protects you from any pressure or manipulation he might try. Which would you recommend? I asked. She was quiet for a moment, genuinely considering, not just performing consideration. Option 3, she said finally. File the complaint today, before he gets home. Then confront him tonight with me here. He needs to understand that the situation is already larger than a conversation between a husband and wife. That there are official processes in motion that his charm or his explanations cannot simply undo. I nodded slowly. Ngozi. Her voice shifted, still steady, but softer at the edges. Whatever happens tonight, you are not doing this to destroy him. You are doing this to protect yourself. That is not the same thing. Keep that clear in your mind. I looked at my sister across the table, across the documents, across the years, across all the times she had sat across from me at various tables and said the sharp, necessary thing that I needed to hear. And I felt a wave of love for her so strong it was almost painful. Thank you for coming, I said. She waved her hand, the way she does when emotion embarrasses her. We are going to the police station now. Drink your tea first. The police station was 20 minutes away. The officer who took my statement was a woman. Chief Inspector Amaka Egui, broad-shouldered and deliberate, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck that she put on to review the photographs on my phone with the focused attention of someone who has seen document fraud before and knows exactly what she is looking at. She asked me the standard questions. She wrote everything down with the unhurried certainty of someone whose handwriting will one day become an official record. She looked at the photographs of the forged power of attorney, the valuation report, the listing instructions, the notary folder from Emika's study, the email chain printouts. You have been thorough, she said, looking up at me. I keep records, I said. It is my work. A small smile crossed her face, brief, professional. Good. That will help us. She put down her pen. Madam Ngozi, I want to be clear with you about what happens next. We will issue a notice of investigation to your husband. He will be asked to come in for questioning. He cannot be arrested on the basis of this statement alone. We need to conduct an investigation first, verify the documents, interview the notary and the property firm. But the investigation begins today, and that is what matters. Once it begins, any action he takes to interfere with you, your property, or these proceedings will carry additional charges. How long will the investigation take? Adana asked from beside me. A few weeks, perhaps a month. These matters require document analysis and coordination with the land registry. She looked at me steadily. Can you manage in the meantime? Are you safe at home? I thought about Emika. 26 years of him. He had never raised his hand to me. That was the truth, and I would not pretend otherwise. He had been cold and distant, and clearly capable of deceiving me in ways I had not imagined. But I did not believe he would become violent when confronted. I believed he would become very quiet. Yes, I said. I am safe. Good. Do you have someone who can be with you tonight? My sister, I said. She will be there. Chief Inspector Egui nodded, satisfied. She stamped the statement, gave me a copy, and shook my hand at the door of her office, a firm, brief, conclusive handshake. Walking back to the car, Adana put her hand briefly through my arm. How do you feel? She asked. I considered it honestly. Like someone who has been walking on a surface they thought was solid ground. I said, and just discovered it was glass all along. But also, I paused. Also like someone who stepped off the glass before it broke. Just barely. But off. Adana squeezed my arm and said nothing. She did not need to. He came home at 6:45. Adana and I were sitting in the living room. I had not made dinner. I had not turned on the television. I had simply set out 3 glasses of water on the center table, and we sat and we waited. He came in through the front door and stopped when he saw Adana. Whatever he had been expecting when he opened that door. A normal Friday evening, a quiet house, a meal on the stove, it was not this. I watched the calculations move across his face the way weather moves across a sky. A brief flash of surprise, followed by the careful composure of a man who has been managing other people's perceptions of him for a long time. Adana, he said, with a smile that did not reach his eyes. I didn't know you were visiting. Hello, Emika, she said. Neutral. Undisturbed. He looked at me. I looked back at him. Something passed between us in that look, something that had no name, but that both of us felt. The knowledge that we had crossed into different territory. That the conversation that was about to happen was not like other conversations. Sit down, I said. My voice was calm. I had practiced that calm all week, in the early mornings when I lay awake in the dark, and it was there now when I needed it. There is something we need to discuss. He set his bag down slowly. He sat in the armchair across from us. I placed 3 photographs on the center table, face up, where he could see them clearly. The power of attorney. The listing instruction letter. The email chain with the buyer. I watched his face. A man's face, when he realizes that the thing he believed was secret is no longer secret, goes through a particular sequence. I watched it happen. The brief stillness, the almost imperceptible tightening around the eyes, the moment where he considered denial, and then the moment where he realized denial would be pointless, and then the moment of very particular stillness that comes after that. He said nothing for almost a full minute. Then, Ngozi, let me speak first, I said. Please. He closed his mouth. I found the envelope on Monday morning, I said. I photographed everything before I opened it, and after I opened it, and before I put it back. On Tuesday, I went to the land registry and filed a formal objection, which has frozen the consent application. On Friday, today, I filed a criminal complaint with the police. Chief Inspector Agui of the Aka State CID has a copy of every document in that envelope and photographs of the folder in your study and a record of the email chain with Mr. Daiko Koye. The silence in the room was the kind that has weight. That signature on the power of attorney is not mine, I said. We both know that. And now the police know it too, and the land registry knows it. And the notary in Onitsha is going to be interviewed next week as part of the investigation. Emeka looked at the table. Not at me. At the table. Why? I asked. And I was surprised by how steadily the word came out, because it was the question that had kept me awake all week. The question underneath all the practical questions. The one that actually mattered. 26 years, Emeka. Why? He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than usual, flattened, the way a voice gets when there is no performance left in it. I owed money, he said. A lot of money. From the construction contracts. I subcontracted some work 3 years ago, and the man disappeared. I had guaranteed the supplier payments personally. They had been threatening me. A pause. I didn't know how to tell you. We had already had the difficult years with the business, and I thought. You thought it would be easier to forge my signature and sell my house than to tell me the truth, I said. He said nothing. My father's house, I said. The house he built with 15 years of factory wages and left to me with his own hands, because he wanted to make sure I would always have something that was mine. Emeka put his face in his hands. I felt the sadness again, not for him, but for the years. For all the mornings and evenings and meals and silences. For the version of the marriage I had believed in, which had not been entirely false. There had been real things in it, real warmth, real shared history, but which had been built, without my knowing, on a foundation that he had been quietly undermining for years. I am not here to destroy you, I said, and I meant it the way Adana had told me to mean it, clearly and cleanly, without performance. But I am also not able to protect you from the consequences of what you have done. The police investigation will proceed. That is out of my hands now. What do you want? He asked. His voice was muffled behind his hands. I want a divorce, I said. And I want a written notarized witnessed undertaking, prepared by Adana, signed by you today, that you make no claim on the Obi Street property. Not now, not ever. And that you withdraw in writing from all proceedings with Gold Leaf Properties and with Mr. Okoye. He looked up then. If you sign both of those documents tonight, I said, I will not seek additional civil damages. The criminal investigation will continue regardless. That is the law's business, not mine. But I will not pursue further action on my own behalf. That is what I am offering you. He looked at Adana. She met his gaze without expression, which I knew meant she was furious, but she was letting me lead. He looked back at me. And then, quietly, with no more negotiation, he said, Okay. Adana had brought the documents with her. Of course she had. She had drafted them that afternoon before we went to the police station, because she had known her brother-in-law well enough, after 26 years of watching him, to know that he was not the kind of man who would escalate into violence or dramatic resistance. He was the kind of man who would calculate, and when the calculation came out against him, he would accept. He signed at 8:10, with Adana as witness and a neighbor's husband called in from next door to serve as an additional witness. He did not argue about a single clause. When it was done, he picked up his bag from beside the front door and said he was going to stay with his brother in Nui for the time being. I did not object. I stood in the living room doorway and watched him carry 2 bags to his car. He had packed quietly upstairs while Adana was having the documents signed and witnessed, and he paused at the gate and looked back at the house. I do not know what he saw when he looked at it. Perhaps the years. Perhaps the failure. Perhaps simply the end of a plan that had not worked. He got in his car and drove away. I stood at the gate for a long time after the sound of the engine faded. The rain had stopped. The night air was cool and clean, the way it gets after rain, when everything has been washed and the world smells briefly of its own beginning. The neighbor's dog barked twice somewhere down the road, and then was quiet. In the pawpaw tree at the back of the garden, something rustled. Adana came to stand beside me. Are you all right? She asked. I don't know yet, I said. Ask me in a month. She put her arm around my shoulder, and we stood there together in the cool after-rain dark, 2 daughters of a man who had believed, quietly and absolutely, that a woman should always have something that is entirely her own. The investigation took 6 weeks. Emeka was called in for questioning 3 times. On the second occasion, he admitted to the forgery, formally on the record. The notary confirmed he had been presented with what appeared to be legitimate identification documents for me, documents which were later found to be fraudulent copies, professionally altered. The notary was cleared of wrongdoing. Emeka was charged with document forgery and fraud under the criminal code. Because he had confessed, because the fraudulent sale had not been completed, and because I did not pursue additional civil action, the court sentenced him to 18 months of supervised community service and a fine. He was not imprisoned. Some people who heard the story said this was too lenient. Adana said it was within the range, and that what mattered was the record, the official, permanent, court-stamped record of what he had done. The divorce was finalized in March. For months after that November evening, it was simpler than I had expected. There were no children to arrange custody of, no property dispute to resolve, because I had protected the house and he had signed away any claim to it. There was simply the paperwork and the waiting period, and then the document that said that the marriage which had lasted 26 years was legally over. I held that document for a long time the afternoon I received it. I am not sure what I expected to feel. Some people say they felt liberated. Some say they felt grief. Some say they felt nothing at all, which frightened them. What I felt was something I can only describe as a kind of returning. As though I had been standing a long way from myself for years, deferring, adjusting, shrinking, making room, and was now slowly and quietly walking back. The first thing I did for myself, the very first deliberate, frivolous, purely personal thing, was buy a proper reading chair. I had always read on the sofa, perched sideways, never fully comfortable, because Emeka found reading in the sitting room antisocial, and I had always adjusted. Now I went to a furniture shop in Oka and I bought a proper reading chair. Wide, deep, covered in dark green fabric, with an ottoman for my feet and a floor lamp beside it that gave exactly the right light. I put it in the corner of the bedroom by the window. And every evening after work, I sat in it and read. It sounds like a small thing. It was not a small thing at all. The second thing I did was call my oldest friend, Chidinma, who had moved to Enugu 15 years ago, and whom I had slowly, without quite noticing, allowed to fall away into occasional WhatsApp messages and Christmas calls. I called her one Saturday morning and talked for 2 hours. She came to visit the following month, and we cooked together and laughed about things from 30 years ago, and I felt the particular warmth of a friendship that has roots, the kind that does not die, only goes dormant, and comes back when you water it. The third thing I did was enroll in a textile design course at the Anambra Women's Development Center. I had always loved fabric, always noticed color and pattern, always arranged and rearranged the cushions and curtains in the house in ways that Emeka never commented on. Now I learned the names for things I had always known by feel. I learned about indigo and resist dyeing and the history of a dyer cloth and how the women of Abeokuta turned a craft into an economy. I learned that what I had thought of as a minor interest was actually a deep one. My instructor, a bright-eyed woman named Annie Philomena, who was 63 and had no patience for self-doubt, looked at my first proper piece, a length of deep blue cloth with hand-drawn patterns that I had somehow managed to pull off on the 3rd try, and said, "You have an eye. Where has this been hiding?" "In someone else's house," I said. She looked at me for a moment, then nodded, without asking for more explanation. The women I met at the center became something I had not expected: community. There was Mrs. Ebel Nwoy, 58, who had retired early from teaching and was learning pottery. There was Adiz, 49, who ran a small catering business and came to the textile course because, as she put it, a woman should know more than one thing. There was Sister Ngozi, another Ngozi, which we found endlessly amusing, who was 62, a retired nurse, learning everything she could about everything she hadn't had time to learn during her working years. We started meeting on Friday evenings at Mrs. Ebel's house. Just for tea, just for conversation. It became the thing I looked forward to most all week. We talked about our children, those who had them. We talked about our work, our bodies, our plans. We talked about the particular texture of being a woman in the middle years. The strange combination of freedom and loss, of knowing more than you ever have and being less certain than you used to be about what to do with what you know. One evening, Sister Ngozi said something I have thought about many times since. "You know what nobody tells you when you are young?" she said, refilling her cup from the thermos on the table. "They do not tell you that the second half of your life is yours to write. The first half, you are mostly responding. Responding to your parents, your school, your husband, your children, your circumstances. You are writing a story that other people are mostly narrating for you." She set down the thermos. "But after a certain age, if you are lucky, if you are paying attention, you realize that the pen is in your hand now, and you can write whatever you choose." We sat with that for a moment. "I wish someone had told me that at 30, Adiz said. "You would not have believed it at 30, Sister Ngozi said serenely. "You have to earn the knowledge. It comes through the difficulty." I thought of the cold pre-dawn morning at the dining table. The photographs. The land registry. Chief Inspector Igui's firm handshake. The signed documents on a Friday night. The sound of a car driving away. "Yes," I said quietly. "It does." In June, 7 months after that November train journey, I went looking for the old woman. I am not sure what I expected to find. I had never learned her name. I knew only that she boarded at a particular station and disembarked at Npor Junction, and that she visited her granddaughter on Tuesdays. I went on a Tuesday. I took the 6:15 train, the same one, and I sat in the same car and I looked at every station for a small white-haired woman in a blue Ankara blouse and a hand-woven shawl. She was not there. At Npor Junction, I got off and asked the station attendant, a young man who had been working that platform for 4 years, whether he knew of an elderly woman who regularly boarded or disembarked there on Tuesdays, very small, white hair, always carrying a battered leather bag. He thought for a moment. Then he shook his head. "Not in the time I have been here, Ma," he said. "I would remember someone like that." I stood on the platform as the train moved on without me, and I looked at the dusty road beyond the station, and I turned the small folded piece of paper over in my coat pocket. I had carried it with me since November, transferred it from coat to coat, from pocket to pocket, the way you carry something you are not ready to put away. I do not have a definitive explanation for that woman. I am a records clerk. I believe in documents, in evidence, in things that can be verified. I cannot verify her. I cannot explain how she knew about the envelope, or the dust on the OB Street dining table, except that she did not, precisely, know about the envelope. She knew about patterns. She knew about women and houses, and the particular vulnerability of women who do not keep their own records. Perhaps she was exactly what she appeared to be, a very old woman, very wise, who had seen enough of life to recognize a pattern when she sat beside it on a train. Perhaps something else. I am not prepared to say. What I know is this. She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand, and I kept it, and I read it, and I listened. And what the listening cost me was a marriage that had been quietly dying for years. And what it gave me was a house, a life, a reading chair, a textile course, a circle of women on Friday evenings, and the slowly growing knowledge that at 54 years old, I was not at the end of something. I was tentatively and genuinely at a beginning. On the veranda of my father's house, my house, on a warm January evening, I sat with a cup of tea and watched the sun go down over the hibiscus along the back fence, all of it flushed orange and red in the last light, and I thought about what my father used to say. A woman who owns something can always begin again. He meant the house, I think. He meant the physical, concrete thing, the walls and the roof and the title deed. But sitting there in the fading light, I thought that what he was really talking about was not the house at all. He was talking about the knowing, about owning your own knowledge, about keeping your own records, about understanding what belongs to you, not just the property, but the life, the choices, the pen. A woman who knows what is hers and protects it and refuses to be quietly removed from the story of her own life. That woman can always begin again, even at 54, even after 26 years. Even after grief and betrayal and the long, humbling process of realizing how much you had allowed yourself to shrink. You can begin again. And the beginning, when it comes, is yours. Friends, if this story stayed with you, If any part of Ngozi's journey felt familiar, or gave you courage, or made you think of something you have been waiting too long to protect, then it has done what it was meant to do. We are often told to be patient, to be gracious, to keep the peace, keep the house, keep other people's comfort carefully arranged. And there is goodness in all of that. But there is also this: know what is yours. Know it clearly. Document it. Protect it. Because the woman who knows what belongs to her cannot easily be moved from the center of her own life. And if you are sitting somewhere today feeling like it is too late to start over, too late to speak up, too late to claim the life you wanted, I want you to hear this. It is not too late. The pen is in your hand. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story. And in the comments below, tell us where you are watching from and share one thing, just one thing, that you are choosing to begin again. We read every single one. Until next time, take care of yourselves and of each other.